variance linked to household income in the UK Biobank. In 1935, the US passed laws to sterilize financially irresponsible people for the bad genes. The difference between those two statements is one policy meeting. Today, we proudly propose banning all research into genoeconomics. Let's be clear, genoeconomics is a research linking DNA to economic behaviors like income, risk taking, entrepreneurship, or trust. Banning all research means criminalizing funding, conducting, or publishing it, like we do with human cloning. Medical genetics for disease stays legal. This motion bans only studies saying Gene X makes you poor. Our burden is to prove that the catastrophic, historically proven harms of this research vastly outweigh the speculative benefits, and we will. So, my first argument is that this research creates legal discrimination under hereditary caste systems. Judges, science does not say in the lab. The moment you publish gene set A correlates with income, three industries act immediately. First, insurance. The US Genetic Information Non-Discrimination Act of 2008 explicitly does not cover life insurance, disability, or long-term care. In 2023, 76% of US life insurers already use non-genetic behavioral data. A 2021 JAMA test study found that individuals with APOE4 Alzheimer's genes were quoted life insurance premium 300% higher despite it being illegal to ask. Genoeconomics gives them a legal backdoor. Second, employment and education. In 2017, Estonia's government proposed using genetic data to guide students into careers. In China, BGI Genomics in 2023 published studies linking genes to educational attainment. Sichuan cities schools are already piloting genetic tests to screen kids at age 12.
Point of
No
information.
financial planning. Did anyone have a POI?
Yeah, that was yeah.
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
All right. So you stated verbatim the difference between those two is one policy meeting and introduction. You referred to a study being published in a journal and a subsequent outcome that hmm, the that will lead to ramifications on a policy level. However, since there are so many steps in between the introduction of a new idea and the introduction and acceptance of it into policy frameworks, how would you justify this considering like the large set of steps in between? And there's not just one policy
So we're
meeting.
saying that our speech is talking about how general economics is harming the civilians by bringing a barrier between them. They're differentiating between caste and all. And the other line, the last line that I had said, this was created by the opposition. This was created by someone who thinks that we are trying to create that we are trying to create an act where we are trying to say that people who are financial irresponsible, they're trying to spend things on whatever they want, it's just happening because of their bad genes. We want to implement these policies, but this is not the case. We just want to remove the barrier between the people that has been created just because of their genes. So to continue with my speech, I would like to bring my our second argument, which the field is scientifically fraudulent, which makes the caste risk worse. So the Genoeconomics fails every test of good science, and that's why it will be weaponized to enforce the hereditary hierarchy. A 2023 meta-analysis in Nature Genetics of 72 sociogenomics studies found a median replication rate of 4.2%. For context, cancer research replicates 11 to 25% of the time, and that's considered a crisis. When you run a GWAS on 400,000 people for income, you get a statistical noise.
POI.
I accept the POI.
Right. So you said, and I quote, that insurers, employers, and governments would immediately act on this research. Now, if according to you, if those actors are the problem, why you want to ban the research itself rather than regulate how the information is used?
Because even if you regulate, it can create black markets and all where they can sell the genetic information, and as a result they can again cause the barrier. Because so that's why a strict ban should be implemented. And again, to continue with my speech, I would like to bring my third and last argument, that the precedent says that society bans knowledge when misuse is foreseeable. Finally, the chilling effect is the entire point. We already banned research categories and human cloning, chemical weapons research, and smallpox virus recreation. And that's why That's why, for the child whose caste was abolished in 1950 but whose DNA will be judged in 2030, we proudly propose the motion. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, speaker. I welcome the next speaker. Here.
Sure, give me 30 seconds. Just a second. I hope I'm audible and visible. Yeah,
Yes to
sure.
both.
Yes. Greetings to the House at large. I'm Vedant Agarwal, and I am the leader of opposition. I prefer my POIs verbally, preferably in the second part of my debate. My pronouns are he and him, and I shall start with self count of 3, 2, 1. Panel, the government seems to have completely misunderstood the topic. The Prime Minister's argument on insurance discrimination is a massive conflation error that completely mischaracterizes the boundaries of this motion. She wants the panel to panic over the medical dystopia that has absolutely nothing to do with the text on the page. Let me tell you about some nuance. This motion explicitly states genoeconomics, the study of how genetics correlates to economic behaviors like risk aversion and long-term saving habits, not medical genetics that will dictate insurance companies. Secondly, like I just said, these genoeconomics dictates risk aversion. It will not tell if the man will become rich or poor. It will simply tell what will his tendencies be. Will he like long-term investment? Will he like short-term investment? Would he like to save? Would he like to spend? It does not create any social stigmatization. It will not tell his future. With this, I come to our core characterization. We need to establish a characterization of what genoeconomics actually is. The government wants you to imagine it's a sci-fi world where we will magically know what will be the financial future of a person. That is not the reality. In reality, genoeconomics uses a genome-wide association studies, or GWAS, to look at hundreds of thousands of tiny genetic variations to build a polygenic index. This index does not predict wealth, destiny, or morality. It measures mild aggregate behavioral propensities. These are, let's say, risks of risk aversion levels, time discounting, educational attainments. How much will the person want to attain education? How much will he want to save? This is what genoeconomics tells us, and this is what the research brings out. It's no, thank you. It simply brings out what is probable to happen. And this brings me to the nuance. It is probabilistic, not deterministic. A gene is not an unchangeable script. It is simply a vulnerability or an inclination that only expresses itself when triggered by a specific environment, let's say. A genetic predisposition, let's say, towards short-term impulsivity only leads to financial ruin if the individual is left completely unsupported. And that unsupported is what the government wants. Therefore, the burden on the government's bench today is to prove that scientific knowledge itself is so inherently controllably evil that the state must deploy somehow authoritarian censorship to ban a branch of thought, to ban research. The burden on our opening opposition side is simply to prove that banning this research leaves the state structurally blind, locking them in inequality, and a transparent, regulated, scientific framework yields a far, far higher probability of human equity. With this, I come to my first substantive. Genoeconomic research is a mandatory prerequisite for the equitable welfare state. Without it, the state is trapped in what I would call a one-size-fits-all, a model that implicitly punishes individuals for biological traits they cannot control. I'll give you two reasons. Current economic policies treat every single citizen like a blank slate, as if they enter this world with no history. That is false. They assume everyone possesses the same biological capacity for long-term planning, focus, or risk calculation. When vulnerable individuals fall into debt loops or drop out of school, a blind state blames their morals or their character. Research in genoeconomics proves that some people are playing the economic game on an incredibly high difficulty setting due to unseen biological variations. Secondly, because genes require environmental triggers to express themselves, mapping these genetic vulnerabilities allows the state to deploy targeted environmental shields. That is, if we know that a particular person is risk averse, he would not like to go to school, the government can focus on him, can administer him precise policies, can administer him precise teaching. If we know the specific demographic of a high polygenic index for financial impulsivity, the state can design zero friction choice architecture. Let's say automatic locked pension fund enrollment. Yeah.
To quote, you said that geoeconomics will help you decide whether a person genetically would want to invest long term or short term. Say your genetics say that you want to invest short term, but you actively want to make a choice to invest long term, but you're not given the opportunity because your genetics say that you can't have it. So, isn't that wrong?
Madam Speaker, ma'am, you look like you're confusing with your own point. You just said that the gene is short term, but you want to do long term. If you inherently want to do long term, who is stopping you? The government won't be like, oh, wait, your gene is saying short term, you can't do long term. The genes are what dictate a person's behavior. If the genes dictate short term, if the genes dictate short term, it's very unlikely the person will be long term. Coming back to my arguments, I'll be doing a short weighing. Firstly, on the severity of the impact. The government is fighting against a hypothetical fear of corporate discrimination. However, we weigh their hypothetical fear against the maximum severity catastrophe of permanent, unfixable systemic inequality. You can easily pass laws to ban insurance companies from demanding DNA tests. That is standard regulation, but you cannot fix systemic poverty if you intentionally outlaw the Berry branch that explains why certain welfare programs fail for certain people. With this, I would like to conclude my statement saying that we need to know how a person acts so that we can administer them what they truly need, not one size fits all. This house must oppose. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Speaker. I welcome the next speaker to start their case. Here.
Am I audible and visible?
Yes, Kubot.
Okay, I just want to start a timer. 1 second. Yes. I'm going to be starting with a self count. I'm going to be starting, and I prefer my POIs at the end of my speech. 1, 2, 3. The Prime Minister gave you a chillingly precise look at history and data. The opposition's case rests on a dangerous illusion that in the real world, corporate boards and state ministries will treat a genetic poverty index with academic detachment. They will not. Science is funded, weaponized, and deployed by institutions driven purely by profit and control. As DPM, I will first dismantle the opposition's core assumption, and then I will deliver our fatal economic extensions. How economics systematically destroys the foundational mechanisms of market capitalism, resulting in a devastating biological economic caste system. Let's start first. The opposition attempts to hand wave our PM's data with two highly native arguments. Let's dismantle them. First, they claim that regulation will prevent discrimination. This ignores how modern data financially institutes and operates. Look at our PM's example of 300% premium hike for Alzheimer's gene. Insurance companies and banks do not need to explicitly put a DNA test established link between a certain genetic maker and a financial risk. Credit scoring companies will buy aggregates. Anonymized data will from consumer genomic firms distribute. They will map it geoeconomically, socioeconomically. All of this will happen. We cannot just pretend on the possibility that all of the people from the good of their heart will just treat it as a study and not take it into evaluate you. Let's go over it even more. Now let's say that they will run an algorithm that checks a geoeconomic risk profile. This is where the ultimate social harms materialize because genes are hereditary, passing down from generation to generation. This research will inevitably divide society into a rigid, inescapable caste system once again, which India once faced. saying if you are born to parents who were poor, and this flawed science labels their genetics as financially irresponsible. You inherit that genetic stigma before you ever earn your first dollar. Genuinely brilliant, hardworking individuals from marginalized background will be systematically starved of credit, proper schooling, and employment opportunities because an algorithm flat their DNA. Meanwhile, mediocre individuals born into wealth will be showered with cheap loans, fast tracks because they possess the ideal gene profile. By allowing this research, you place a meritocracy based on effort and output. With a biological caste system, you permanently freeze upwards mobility, ensuring that the poor stay poor and the rich stay richer under the guise of scientific data. Let's go to the second extension.
POI.
I'll take it towards the end. Corporate predatory targeting. Our second extension shifts from credit exclusion to active cooperation mediation. Our PM shows you how the state will use this data to stream children. I will show you how monopolies will use it to actively strip wealth from the lower caste. Geoeconomics aims to map biological triggers from high time discounting, meaning individuals genetically predisposed to favor short term gratifications over long term financial security. I am not saying that genetic development or finding out genetic is wrong. Science is not wrong, but using that in economics to judge a person only based on their hereditary genetics, that is what wrong. And most companies will not take it out of the goodness of their heart and say that we will not use these to define a person. We have seen it with the caste system. People always use hereditary techniques to define a single person. They will use it to engineer the most predatory consumer environment in human history. Subprime leaders, online lenders, online gambling syndics, and hyper leveraged trading apps will use geoeconomic profiles to target vulnerable population with absolute precision. They will unleash hyper personalized, algorithmic optimized ads at the exact moment when the person's biological impulse controls is weakest. This is a multi-billion dollar corporate apparatus using genetic sequencing as a weapon to exploit biological vulnerabilities and extract wealth from the bottom of the pyramid. And the ultimate way, let's rearrange the PM's agent code standard. The opposition is defending this research for a marginal speculative upside, a slightly better job matching algorithm. The downside, we have proven through structural incentives of banks, insurers, corporations, the total market in general, that it is total erasure of economic mobility and creation of a hereditary genetic underclass. I would now like to take the POI.
Right, ma'am. So you said, and I quote, that they will map genetic profiles onto economic outcomes. Now, why does that essentially prove that the research itself is harmful rather than the discriminatory actions that follow that are harmful?
Okay, I think you might have missed the second part of my speech, or the part I said after declining the POI in the first, where I said that the scientific research isn't bad. There is nothing wrong with scientific development or genetics development. That is correct, but we cannot trust people, and I quote myself again, out of the goodness of their heart, that corporations will not use that data like how caste system is used to categorize a person and put them into a certain box. So I did answer your question in the last part. And to conclude, I would like to say my opening government takes this round because we want to stop the funding, to shut down labs and protect human dignity, because that is the
Thank,
only way. Thank you.
perfect. Thank you.
Sir, you're on mute in case you're saying something.
Yeah, you can start whenever you are ready.
Okay, I am audible.
Yes,
Okay,
you
so
are.
this is member of prefer pronounce. This is second my teammate is missing something. All right. Prefer pronounce he and him. And am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Yes.
Alright. And I would preferably taking the POIs from my opening bench. With that being said, I will be starting my speech in 3, 2, 1, and go. Side prop have been confusing all throughout the speeches panel. First, they started by saying that genoeconomics would be that one thing that would create a lot more like genetically stratifying underclass people, etc. What they never go ahead and acknowledge is the nuance of this debate, which is the word research here. Panel, we are specifically talking about people who are scholars who want to excel their profile, etc., and want to like research as students in this particular field, right? So they confused academic study with immediate policy, and that is what I would be emphasizing upon in this debate even further. And that is not the only problem which we have in their case. The false dichotomy that they present in this case must be that either the ban study must be entirely banned today, or we face the cooperative genetic system tomorrow. This is completely a logical fallacy. But before my extension, I like to let you know that why does cooperative genetic what does cooperative genetic society in the current status quo look like? Now, OG envisions a world where every financial institution use a single drop of DNA to deny unemployment or something like that. But that is not the case. But here is why the hyperbole falls apart. The entire impact relies on commercial misuse, not academic inquiry, ma'am. So by banning all the research, quote unquote, prop isn't stopping the rogue corporations from developing these technologies in secret. They're simply stripping democratic governments of all the scientific baseline in the very first place. And this would happen due to two main reasons. I think first, this would happen because of the commercial incentive structure. Understand that massive financial incentive exists for private entities to secretly decode the sort of genetic traits tied to commercial behavior, and that is probably why this is a behavioral economics topic. So because rogue corporation, no, thank you, I'll take that later. Because rogue corporations operate outside public scrutiny, a legal ban only drives this creature into dark and like no delta that prop goes ahead and tries to quote unquote label. But then secondly, this will also happen because governments lose all the regulatory capability. They lose all the like scientific literacy, etc., and etc., due to the very reason that I told you before. Apart from the extension, let's just also acknowledge the delta that they try to bring up in this debate. I think prop's entire delta relies upon the idea that banning research completely eliminates the existence of genoeconomic profiling. But that is not the case. But as how we have shown that cooperative incentive to exploit this data does not vanish with the law. Therefore, the exact reason they are terrified of, which is the corporate genetic stratification, exists on both sides of the house today. That is not exclusive to you, ma'am. Even if we consider the very fact, this is not a big impact to talk to you, by the way, which my first speaker goes ahead and tells you. Apart from my extension, let's also acknowledge why we win in this debate on the basis of scope and the people who are vulnerable. On the basis of scope, proposition delta relies massively upon an illusion. They think that ban shrinks the footprint of genoeconomic profiling to zero. But the massive commercial incentive to decode economic behavior do not vanish because a piece of paper. There is a lot more blueprint around this. There's a lot more structural thing around it which is never go ahead and acknowledge. For example, government policies, government laws, etc., and etc. So there's a lot of sort of thing that they're trying to say. So over OG, we simply win because we are exclusive in the point that you cannot regulate the threat you choose to ignore, and by blinding the state, prop guarantees the very cooperative problems that they're trying to prevent. Are much more rebuttals now. I think prop tells you that regulation will simply cause a black market to start. This is highly unlikely in the first place because genoeconomic research is not something which is a rogue corporation that I just told you. It requires massive, highly visible infrastructure, advanced supercomputers, etc., and etc. So for this reason, you cannot run a shadow black market when you are actually do not have the resources in a very economy in and of itself. But even if we consider that these black market will start, it will be really small. Why? Because legitimately these scientists who want to like cooperate with these black markets, they need resources as well, but there are not many resources in these very small black market, and they want certain scientific things as well. So when the scientific scientists are not able to cooperate with that very thing, I think it is very unlikely that it would be a very black market. So the point that they're trying to, the harm that they're trying to point out on us is extremely niche. With that, a POI.
Sure. So I would like to ask a POI. So as we know, Genoeconomics was not exactly inspired, but it is similar to the Nazi twin experiment and the Tuskegee experiment. So there also knowledge was, they said that the knowledge was good. So do you think in this case, by not
Ma'am,
banning Genoeconomics, do you think this is also knowledge is
Ma'am,
good?
we never sort of win a debate by just sort of examples. We're not specifically focusing on certain examples. We're generally talking about why these sort of black markets and like anything which is essentially bad would even if it exists, and then also it would exist on a very small scale as well. To sort of wrap up my debate panel, understand that knowing a risk profile replaces sort of demographic biases with objective data. What they're trying to say is that they're even after all of these harms, they're trying to cope up with their model. And I think these are the very reasons on which OP is extremely proud to oppose. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Speaker. I welcome the next closing bench member of government. Here.
Sir, can I get 30 seconds? Am I visible?
Yeah, you're visual and audible.
Uh, Starting my speech in a backward count of 3, 2, 1, uh, go. Panel, I'll be moving on straight to my rebuttals. So, panel, the opposition, firstly, they claim that we are just stripping them of data. But see, panel, here is the problem is that the economic genetic data, so it basically like leads to many problems, and that the harms, it like basically truly outweighs the good, because the economic genetic data is very dangerous, and the research on the data can be done on like other fields as well. So it's again like you can do it on other areas as well, right? So it's like kind of very bad. And besides, your best case that is kept private, not only will the government try to exploit this data, and that this data will be sold in like lots of areas, and this will be like further proven in my argument. And the solution to this is very simple, it's simply to ban it, right? Panel, another thing that I like to say, panel, the thing is that OG talks a lot about examples, but it does not give like they do not give any reasoning for their arguments, panel. That is why I think their arguments are basically contingent on the fact that I give you proper reasoning for them, because firstly they do not give any impacts and such for their arguments, right? They only give examples. Um, Anyways, moving forward, my first argument is based upon how geoeconomics are not scientifically accurate and what it leads to. Panel, why do I think that this is not accurate? This is very true, because such races have different people or different ideologies. So it's totally wrong. What I mean by this is, supposedly I am an Asian, I'm from the Asian race, right? And there might be another person who is also from an Asian race. I personally follow Hinduism, and he might follow maybe Islam. It's like Islamism, for example, right? Those are two very different ideologies, so they have two very different ways of spending and of living their lifestyle, right? So, panel, you cannot judge a person based on their genes. A panel, what happens is that geoeconomics is not very accurate. It is scientifically proven to not be very accurate. In fact, it's so accurate that it's better to not take into consideration when we're doing all of this. Panel, what this leads to is that certain races face total unfairness and inequality. What I mean by this is, supposedly if a certain race spends very less time So if they have like very bad financial management skills, according to that geoeconomic, right, basically companies will like not basically these companies, so basically what will happen is that these companies will not open branches over there because they think that these people will not spend so much, because these people supposedly if like basically a race does not spend so much, right, so a company will not open any of their stores there, and that is very bad. Like they will not open any franchisees over there, and that is very bad, because again that leads to a lot of variety, and that is morally wrong that you're not opening there just because you think that a specific race is very bad, right. But now on the comparative, what happens is that on our side this never actually happens because we ban it in the first place. We do not let it grow. B panel. The thing is that again, what happens is that government and banks and again companies such will not give loans to these races because they think that they have poor financial management. But of course, and of course they don't want to go in like a law, right? Of course the government would not be supposedly wanting to give people who have bad financial management, which is according to the geoeconomic base, right? So basically if the geoeconomic says that Asians have bad financial management, the government will tend to not often give them any loans or anything such, and that is very bad because some people need that. And then panel what leads then panel again,
POI.
that is very unfair. I'll take that later, because that is very because that is very unfair to them, right? And panel, notice how this never happens on our side because we treat them as like equal and not like based on geoeconomics. And another thing that happens is that the people do not hire such races because they think that these people are like not very good, right? See panel, what happens is that many investors will also then stop investing in these companies because whose founders have like poor financial races according to that geoeconomic thing. This looks like several people not investing in a company just because a specific race owns them, and that is very wrong. But notice what happens is that people do not judge a company based on the product. What they judge is that if the person there is Asian or not, if he has good financial, if he has like good financial management or not, and that is very wrong. Panel, what are the impacts for this argument and why does this matter? This matters because we actually prove to you how people get judged in their world, and they get judged very wrongly. Panel, now what are the impacts? A, people get judged for their race, and that is horrible. B, races cannot improve because people are not willing to help them. And C, this normalizes inequality in their world. And panel, these impacts are exclusive because OG does not give any impacts, or at least ones that have much difference in the status quo. Panel, my other argument will be about data privacy. This claim is based upon the fact that data can get leaked, so someone else might find out. What happens is that many companies want this data because, of course, they want to know how the market is working and how the market functions. So when they get this data, they can just use it against specific races, and because of course people are willing to sell it due to the money, so they can use it against specific races. That is very bad, and that is what we are again so proud to oppose, so proud to propose. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, speaker. I welcome the next speaker to start their case. Here.
All right, I'd just like a few seconds. All right, and I'll begin with my speech on the self countdown of 3, 2, and 1. Good evening, honorable adjudicator and my fellow speakers. My name is Yug, and today I will be the member of opposition for the motion. This house believes it should ban all research into genoeconomics. Firstly, I would like to start with the rebuttal proposed by the proposition side. The PM stated verbatim that research into genoeconomics would create legal discrimination, with her partner, the DPM, stating that it will divide us into castes such as India has faced in the past. However, there are two parts wrong with this argument, which I'll elaborate to you in more detail right now. The first part is that there's no link between research and policy formation that's as direct and as explicit as the ones they're implying. This is an example of a classic snowball fallacy, wherein an idea is taken to its illogical extreme extent and thus misrepresented. Panel, does the research into a topic immediately imply that that topic will be integrated into policy and law before our society has found frameworks to control its integration? Of course not. It takes so much time from the presentation of new ideas in literature and scientific research all the way up till when they enter government chambers and actually become part of policy and or law. There are so many steps in between. First, it needs to be discussed by general society, and then it needs to become widely accepted by the scientific community in and of itself. And then politicians finally start taking notice. So in conclusion, this link is not at all established in a causal and direct way.
You are?
by the proposition later, second half of the speech. The second part of my argument against this rebuttal against this argument is that no system relies on the goodness of a person's heart or of the general population's heart, as the proposition is suggesting. Panel, please give me a single example of a system which is designed solely with a person's goodness in mind. Not one system across policy, economics, the legal sphere, or the environmental sphere. Will you find an example that is based solely on people and their own sense of morality and ethics? Every system is designed keeping in mind that people are flawed, people can lie, and people can act in non-ethical ways purely for their own self-interest. So my answer to this is that no system that we create regarding the regulation of genoeconomics and its implementation and policy will function based entirely on the goodness of a person. Now, moving on to my arguments. My first argument against this motion is that this could lead to a lot of collateral damage to beneficial research. You see, because genoeconomics is a wide spectrum. On one side, it blends into research about economics that analyzes people using data and statistics. And on the other side, it blends into medical research, genetics, hereditary character traits, etc. Now, in such a wide range of possible study techniques and possible research areas, there are many aspects of investigation or techniques of investigation that are low risk and some that are high risk. For example, aggregate statistical studies that use large data sets to predict the effect of genes on economics, on a particular, say, savings or the propensity of a person to take risks, are much lower risk than, say, investigations into building a computer, an algorithm, or a tool which will predict people's financial behavior into DNA. A blanket ban ignores all this nuance and instead misrepresents the whole position, doing damage to possibly beneficial fields of study and techniques of research that will come about as a result of investigation into genoeconomics. Additionally, I would like to argue, if I am an entity who wants to influence genoeconomics, what do I do? Do I let researchers from the field and capital from the field stay where I can watch them, where I can see them, or do I let them or do I ban the field and watch them emigrate into other countries and jurisdictions where it's allowed? You see, if I want to control industry standards, ethical standards, and how the entire field of scientific research works, I keep them in my country. I regulate them, but I don't ban them. Why? Because that's the only way to make sure that the field doesn't get out of your hand completely. Finally, I would like to argue that the blanket ban of a field, whether globally or whether in certain jurisdictions, could possibly lead to misinformation spread and polarization. What do the masses think when a field of pure scientific inquiry is banned for no reason? I'm guessing it won't be positive. We've all seen, on a very personal note, we've all seen Instagram perusals or reels which promote absurd conspiracy theories. Hey, the moon isn't real. The moon landing wasn't real. Hey, NASA is hiding something from you. And those are conspiracy theories which still persist based on decades of evidence. If we ban geoeconomics, a pioneering and potentially revolutionary field in its infancy, a proto-science, as you might say, then we're actively fueling conspiracy theorists and people who seek to sow discord in society, to spread rumors and polarization regarding the all topics surrounding this discourse. And with that, I end my speech. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Speaker. I welcome next speaker to start their case.
Just 10 seconds. Right then. I'll be starting in the backward count of 3, 2, 1, go. What's the structure of my speech gonna look like? Firstly, I'm going to weigh out every single side. I'm gonna go to OG, OO, then CO, and finally like show how we're exclusive and we're the most important side for this debate, and why our comparative or whatever we prove is like the most important for this debate. Then going on to OG, what do they give us in the debate? They claim that like first speaker claims that like it contains legal discrimination. They talk about one, Insurance Act, two, employment and education, and I think they just list these claims. And what happens after that is like basically unproven. They don't really show to what extent everything happens, right? So filling that gap, when this happens and people like do get to know about whatever like research is actually done, the impact is twofold. One, those people are like that are targeted in that research and are shown as like dumber, are treated as outcasts. Why? Because these people and their decisions are seen as like lower, or are seen as like not as intellectual. So even if they make good decisions, they're seen as like they're like given like biases and are seen as worse. And two, that point that they never explained, like it's scientifically weak. It never shows like what's like accurately correct or what's 100% correct. So like wrong reports do still exist, and like specific people are still targeted. And three, banning like other stuff means like ban this too. I think that's like false. Why we should ban it is because it like has like outright risks that are like not at all mitigated by like any side. So I think banning it is the best option, because the opposition can like never show how they mitigate the risks that the government proposes. And then they also claim that a caste system will be created. Fair, but they never show it's different from like already existing like racial segregation and such, and like they limit the debate by saying like the Indian caste system will exist. I think their side is fair, but it's like quite limited. There's like
Point
no
of
affirmative
information.
explanation rejected, and their explanation is like mostly examples. The POI asks the speaker like if it's the research itself is corrupted and if it's itself is wrong. Their response is contingent to me proving that due to the research such negative impacts are like created, which is wrong, which means that the research itself is like what created the wrong impacts to begin with, hence why the research should be banned altogether. That is not what they proved, hence why like whatever I prove is like what's correct. And then coming on to OO, because like we already went over OG, they claim that economics are like not harmful, and they claim that just like stuff about behavior, and then they themselves talk about how it's so menial and like it's not needed, it's just simple, just like simple things about like simple people. I think one, pick a side. Do you want substantial information or not? Your framing is on like a small amount of economics, and then your arguments are like on like substantial information that gives like a whole story about a person. And then two, they playing on like high setting is worse. It's like still not helping them. Why? Because in things like economics, the state has an incentive to not care about the people who are like comparatively worse, because like the state sees them as like less important, and the government is mainly majoritarian, as like wants the most benefit out of like certain people. I mean, sure, they would still like want a good world for these people, but the world simply won't
Periwal.
let them like do so. Yeah, I'll take that view.
Why does the state think that they're like not so important as people?
Because they simply can't make the decisions, or like simply can't make the level of decisions according to whatever like your theory proposes, whatever they say about those specific people. So whatever minorities that are already left out are going to be more left out if like the state gets to know that they're not as smart as the majority, because the state wants to like naturally focus on the majority, because the majority gives them the votes, lets them be re-elected. And then another thing is that there's like a lack of rebuttal, because like both the government don't address the scientifically weak point that like I explained right now. That means that there's a deadlock in the opening half. Like even if the government does not care about the people, like independent firms do still care about these like specific metrics, and then those specific people won't still get jobs. And then the DLO claims that this is harmful and we're stopping data understanding and research. I think that's not true. Not every study is useful. This one especially is harmful, and the data being sold is like a problem altogether. Then coming on to CO, they claim that research and policy formation are like not together. The thing is that research is different. It directly targets the people and their ability to use and work with money, and they claim that it takes a lot of time to regulate. That is the problem. They themselves show like if problems arise, which they will, mitigation is hard. Then why are we the most important side for this debate? We are the most important because several reasons. We prove to you how this like Genoeconomics is not accurate, because like people in different races have like different ideologies and they're different. And we're also exclusive because we're the only side that actually shows how we help the vulnerable by like not making them go through these problems, and thus we're the most impactful. We're also like better, like our comparative is better than the opposition, because we have much more impacts, and our world is like much better for the people to live in, because they're like not framed, they're like not purposefully set into a wrong position by like some scam or some sort of wrong information.
Perfect. Thank you, speaker. I welcome next speaker.
Good evening, everyone. Am I audible and visible?
Yeah, yes to both.
Right. So I'm very proud to close this debate as the opposition whip. My POI preferences would be I would take 1 to 2 POIs. You can verbalize them, and I'll take them in the latter half of my speech. My preferred pronouns are he and his. And with that, starting with my speech on the self count of 3, 2, and 1. Panel, I think this debate comes down to one very simple question. When a field of research creates risks, do we ban the knowledge itself or do we regulate what people do with that knowledge? And panel, by the end of this debate, every single government team has failed to prove that the research itself is the harm. I'm going to do this speech team by team and then explain why closing opposition gives you the decisive reason to oppose, starting with the opening government firstly. The entire PM and DPM case relies on a chain of assumptions. They tell us that, okay, researchers publish a study, then insurers use it, then employers use it, then schools use it, then society becomes genetically stratified. The problem is that every step in that chain requires a separate policy choice. Research is not discrimination. Research is not hiring policy. Research is not insurance policy, right? The PM wants you to collapse all of those steps into one and pretend that they're identical. They are not. Notice how every example they gave was not research caused harm. Their examples were institutions making discriminatory decisions. That means the harmful actor is the institution, not the scientist publishing a paper. And CEO already showed why this matters. We regulate banks, we regulate insurers, we regulate employers. No serious system relies on the goodness of people's hearts, right? It relies on rules, oversight, and accountability. So OG never proves why the only solution is banning knowledge itself. Then, next, let's move to the closing up. I think CG actually makes OG's case weaker. Their major argument is that genoeconomics is inaccurate, unreliable, and influenced by environment. But think about the implication. If it's inaccurate, then it becomes less useful for discrimination. If it's unreliable, then companies and governments will have less incentive to use it. If genes don't strongly predict economic outcomes, then the dystopian world OG describes becomes much lesser likely, right? So CG spends 7 minutes telling us why genoeconomics doesn't work, while OG spends 7 minutes telling us it works so well that it can reshape society. Those two cases are pulling in completely opposite directions. And even if CG is correct, banning research is still the wrong response. If a scientific claim is weak, the solution is more research exposing its weakness, right? Not criminalizing research altogether, is what I believe. Now, let's talk about opening opposition. I believe the OO wins the principal debate. They correctly explain that genoeconomics is probabilistic, not deterministic, is how I would like to term it. Now, it does not tell you who will be rich. It does not tell you who will fail. It identifies tendencies and correlations. That matters because OG's entire fear relies on treating genes as destiny. OO already broke that assumption. But here's where closing opposition takes the debate further and has an edge over them. Our extension, the extension given by my partner Yug, is not just that research might have benefits. Our extension is that banning research actually makes the government's fears harder to stop. Think about their world now. The government bans all legitimate research. Universities stop studying it. Independent scientists stop publishing it. What happens? Government lose expertise. Regulators lose expertise. But the incentive to understand economic behavior does not disappear. Because banks at the end of the day still want better prediction models. Corporations will still require consumer data. Private actors still want competitive advantages over others. So what actually happens? The research moves away from transparent institutions into places where nobody can actually monitor it. And that is the key comparative in my speech. Government tells you they're preventing abuse. We tell you they're removing the very people capable of identifying abuse. Government tells you, rejected for now. Government tells you they're protecting society. We tell you that they're quote unquote blinding the society. And notice the difference in mechanism we have to present. Their world assumes every bad actor magically stops being interested in this information. Our world explains why those incentives continue regardless of the ban imposed. That means our impact is more probable and more impactful. Now let's weigh this debate lastly. Government gives you a worst case scenario. Let me repeat, a worst case scenario, a speculative future where discrimination happens. With the opposition, we give you a guaranteed consequence, something that is guaranteed to happen. A world where scientific oversight disappears, regulation becomes weaker,
What?
and public knowledge somewhere shrinks, and potentially useful research is driven underground. Yeah, please, the POI.
Yes. If I'm stating correctly, in the first half of your speech, you put a lot of emphasis on regulations, right?
Right.
Okay. You claim regulations can protect people, but in 2021, and may I say this is not an assumption, this is from the New Yorker, which is a very legitimate magazine. US insurers used a legal loophole to charge people with Alzheimer genes 300% higher premiums despite explicit bans. Why will insurers, educationers, capitalists, or anyone treat geoeconomics data any differently?
Okay, so see, even if you buy half of government's concerns, the answer is still regulation, it's still transparency, and it's still scrutiny, not censorship. I hope that answers the question, and that is all I have to say to this. Now I'll continue with my speech. So when we compare the different benches today, opening opposition proves that knowledge is not inherently harmful. Closing opposition proves that banning knowledge makes the harms harder to detect and control. And that is why I believe CO provides the decisive contribution to this debate. For all of those reasons which I just quoted, we are winning this round. Government is losing the core mechanism of the debate, and I'm very proud to oppose. Thank you so much, everyone.
Perfect. Thank you, speaker. With this, we come to the end of this round. I thank everyone for a great novice finals. You all can leave this room. Thank you. Bye bye.
Just a quick question, sir. So this were the speeches of 7 minutes or 5 minutes?
5 minutes,
5
15 seconds.
All right, thank
Got it, sir.
So this would
Thanks,
also be
panel.
silent round, sir.
Yeah, this is silent round.
All right.
Great debate, everyone.
Thank you,
Yeah,
sir.
great speeches.
Yeah.
Well done, everyone.
Anika, Aryan, please join me in room 21.
Yes.
Yo, Vedant.
Yo, what's up?
I'm
Well,
good. Yeah.
at this point, I'm just sleepy.
I just
I almost slept after my speech, then I joined back.
I just want to say one thing. I don't know from where ideal people are getting their emotions.
I
What?
know,
Gee,
right?
like
I
I I I didn't even expect in like my nightmare that they would give like genoeconomics. I heard the term for the first time today,
I think
genoeconomics.
this motion was like really nice, but I
Huh.
I
didn't.
mean, it was different, but never could I have thought of genoeconomics. Let's mix biology and economics. But good, interesting motion.
Hmm. What time do they announce the results again? Wait. Okay. Okay, so let's maybe meet in the closing ceremony. I have to go now. Bye bye, guys.
Bye bye.
Do they announce the result immediately? So should we go
No,
there?
no,
We
they
just
take
have to
some
wait
time.
on the meet.
Closing ceremony is 9 p.m. onwards. No,
No,
I guess.
we are working. We are before time.
All right.
Okay, bye bye.
Vedant, just give me, like, just join some room एक बार.
अच्छा बता.
Hmm. Join.
Zoom 1 OO prep.
Okay.